Welcome to Senior Relationship After 60. If you're over 60 and you've been told that passion and desire are things of the past, that intimacy is somehow inappropriate at your age, then what I'm about to share might shock you. In 2025, dating apps specifically designed for seniors are seeing record numbers, with millions of people over 60 actively seeking companionship and, yes, physical connection. Yet behind closed doors, so many are struggling in silence with questions they're too embarrassed to ask their doctors or even their partners. You see, there's a quiet crisis happening right now. While society is finally talking about mental health and loneliness in older adults, there's one topic that still makes people uncomfortable: the truth about sex and intimacy after 60. And because no one's having honest conversations about it, countless seniors are left feeling broken, undesirable, or like something's wrong with them. Maybe you've noticed changes in your body that make you wonder if romance is even possible anymore. Perhaps you've lost a long-time partner and can't imagine being vulnerable with someone new. Or maybe you're in a relationship right now, but the spark has faded and you don't know how to talk about it without causing hurt or embarrassment. Here's what doctors and relationship therapists are finally admitting in 2025. The struggles you're facing aren't signs that your love life is over. They're actually the beginning of potentially the most fulfilling, intimate chapter of your entire life. But only if you understand what's really happening and what you can actually do about it. And that's exactly what we're covering today. The truths that no one else will tell you. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through something that could completely transform how you think about love and intimacy at this stage of your life. And I'm not talking about vague advice or feel-good platitudes. I'm talking about real, practical information that relationship experts and medical professionals are finally sharing openly in 2025. Here's exactly what you're about to discover. First, I'll reveal the 3 physical changes that happen after 60 that nobody prepared you for. The ones that make you feel like your body has betrayed you. But more importantly, I'll show you why these changes don't mean the end of intimacy. In fact, when you understand what's actually happening beneath the surface, you'll see why this might be the perfect time to experience a deeper kind of connection than you ever thought possible. These aren't things to fear. They're simply your body's way of entering a new chapter, and there are specific, doctor-approved ways to work with these changes rather than against them. Next, I'll share 2 emotional barriers that silently destroy intimacy in senior relationships. And these have nothing to do with physical ability. One involves the stories we've been telling ourselves since childhood about aging and desirability. The other is about vulnerability and the fear of being truly seen after decades of playing certain roles. I'll show you exactly how to recognize when these barriers are active in your life, and more importantly, how to dismantle them so you can experience genuine emotional and physical closeness again. And finally, I'll give you one conversation framework that changes everything. A simple but powerful way to talk with your partner, or a potential new partner, about intimacy without awkwardness, shame, or misunderstanding. This is the same approach that therapists specializing in senior relationships teach in private sessions, but I'm going to break it down for you step by step. Whether you've been with your partner for 40 years or you're just starting to date again, this framework creates safety, honesty, and opens the door to the kind of intimacy that most people never experience, even in their younger years. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely different perspective on what's possible for you romantically and physically. You'll understand that the challenges you're facing aren't unique to you. They're not signs of failure, and most importantly, they're absolutely solvable. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share could bring back something you thought was lost forever, or help you discover it for the very first time. Let me paint a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You're getting ready for bed, and you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. The person staring back doesn't match the person you feel like inside. There are lines where smooth skin used to be, softness where there was once firmness, and suddenly you're wondering, would anyone find this body desirable? Would anyone want to touch it with tenderness and passion? Or maybe it's different for you. Maybe you're lying next to someone you've loved for decades, and there's this growing distance between you that neither of you knows how to bridge. You want to reach out to feel close again, but something stops you. Is it fear? Embarrassment? Or maybe it's just easier to convince yourself that this is simply what happens when you get older, that wanting physical intimacy at your age is somehow inappropriate or unrealistic. For some of you, the struggle is even more specific. You're taking medications that have stolen something precious from you. The ability to respond the way you used to feel what you once felt. Your doctor mentioned it might be a side effect, but they said it so casually, as if losing this part of yourself was just a minor inconvenience you should accept. And now you're left wondering if there's any point in even trying anymore. And then there's the world around you constantly reinforcing this narrative. Turn on the television and romance is reserved for the young and beautiful. Your own children might make uncomfortable jokes if you mention dating or attraction, as if the idea of their parent having desires is something embarrassing. Society has written this script that says once you hit a certain age, you're supposed to gracefully exit the stage of romance and passion, focusing instead on grandchildren and quiet hobbies. But here's what's really happening beneath all of this. You're not just dealing with physical changes or medication side effects. You're carrying decades of conditioning that taught you desire has an expiration date. You're navigating a culture that celebrates youth and treats aging bodies as something to hide rather than honor. And you're doing all of this without anyone having honest, compassionate conversations about what's normal, what's possible, and what you actually deserve at this stage of life. The loneliness of this silence is crushing. You might be in a relationship and still feel utterly alone with these thoughts. Or you might be single, convinced that it's too late to find someone who would want you, really want you, scars, wrinkles, health conditions and all. You scroll through your phone late at night, seeing glimpses of other people's lives, wondering if you're the only one feeling this way, the only one who still craves touch, connection, and yes, even passion. The truth is, you're not imagining these challenges. They're real. But what's also real, and what most people won't tell you, is that every single one of these struggles has a path forward. Not a way back to being 30 again, but something potentially even better. A way to experience intimacy that's richer, more authentic, and more deeply satisfying than anything you knew in your younger years. And that's exactly what we're about to explore together. Let me tell you about a woman named Catherine, a 67-year-old retired teacher from Oregon who reached out to me last year. Her story isn't unique, but it's powerful because it shows just how deeply these struggles can affect us, and how much is possible when we finally face them honestly. Catherine had been widowed for 3 years. Her husband of 42 years had passed away after a long illness, and she spent those years caring for him with devotion that never wavered. But when he was gone, she found herself in a kind of limbo she hadn't anticipated. The grief was expected. The loneliness made sense. What caught her completely off guard was the aching desire for physical touch and intimacy that started creeping back into her life about 18 months after his passing. She felt consumed by guilt. How could she want these things when her husband, the love of her life, was gone? Her friends were supportive about her grief. But when she tentatively mentioned feeling lonely in a deeper way, the conversation would shift uncomfortably. Her daughter actually said, "Mom, you're 67. Maybe it's time to just focus on yourself and the grandkids." As if wanting companionship and physical closeness was somehow selfish or age inappropriate. So Catherine did what so many people do. She tried to bury it. She threw herself into volunteer work, spent more time with her grandchildren, took up painting. But late at night, the longing remained. She felt like half a person, like an essential part of her humanity had been declared off limits simply because of her age. Then something unexpected happened. At a community art class, she met a man named Richard, a 71-year-old widower who had lost his wife 5 years earlier. They started talking after class, just friendly conversation at first. But over weeks, she felt something she thought had died with her husband. Genuine attraction. The flutter in her stomach when she saw him. The way she caught herself thinking about him during the day. When Richard finally asked her to dinner, Catherine said yes. But that night, as she stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear, she was paralyzed by fear. Her body wasn't what it used to be. She'd been through menopause. She had scars from a surgery 2 years ago. What if things progressed and he was disappointed? What if her body couldn't respond the way it used to? What if she'd forgotten how to be intimate with someone new? She almost canceled. She had her phone in her hand, ready to make an excuse. But then she remembered something her late husband had told her during his final months. "Don't let fear steal whatever time you have left, Catherine. Promise me you'll keep living fully." That dinner turned into a second date, then a third. The connection between them grew deeper. And eventually, they had to face the conversation that terrified her most. Talking about physical intimacy at their age, with all the vulnerabilities and uncertainties that came with it. What Catherine discovered in that conversation, and in the weeks that followed, completely changed not just her relationship with Richard, but her entire understanding of what intimacy could be after 60. She learned something that her doctors had never mentioned, that her friends had never discussed, and that society certainly never celebrated. So what exactly did Catherine and Richard figure out? What made the difference between living in fear and shame, and experiencing a level of intimacy that Catherine describes as even more fulfilling than her younger years? That's exactly what I'm about to show you in the next section. The specific steps that made all the difference. Now let's get into the practical steps that can transform your experience of intimacy after 60. Step 1. Understanding your body's new language. Here's what most doctors won't take the time to explain properly. Your body after 60 isn't broken, it's speaking a different language. For women, the hormonal shifts that come with menopause don't eliminate desire or capacity for pleasure, but they do change the roadmap. Vaginal dryness, for instance, isn't a stop sign. It's simply your body saying it needs different kinds of support now. Water-based lubricants aren't something to be embarrassed about. They're tools that allow pleasure to continue. And here's something fascinating. Many women report that after menopause, once they address the physical comfort issues, they actually experience more freedom in intimacy because pregnancy concerns are completely off the table. For men, the changes are equally misunderstood. Erectile function may not be as automatic as it was at 25, but that doesn't mean it's gone. Medications like those prescribed for blood pressure or depression can impact performance, but there are medical solutions. From prescription options your doctor can discuss, to simple timing adjustments for when you take certain medications. And here's the truth nobody talks about. Many men discover that when the pressure of instant performance is removed, they become more attentive, more creative, and more focused on mutual pleasure rather than just their own function. The key is this. Stop comparing your 60-year-old body to your 30-year-old body. Instead, learn what your body needs now. Schedule a candid conversation with your doctor specifically about sexual health, not as an embarrassing side topic, but as a primary health concern. Ask directly about medication side effects and alternatives. Inquire about hormone therapy options if appropriate. Your sexual well-being is as important as your heart health or bone density. Step 2. The Vulnerability Conversation Blueprint. Catherine's breakthrough with Richard came from a single conversation that changed everything. But it wasn't what they talked about, it was how they talked about it. Here's the framework that therapists specializing in senior relationships recommend. And it works whether you've been married for decades or you're just starting to date someone new. Start with acknowledgement, not apology. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry my body isn't what it used to be," try, "I want to share something that feels vulnerable for me." This shifts the energy from shame to honesty. Then share your specific concerns without self-deprecation. Say things like, "My body responds differently now and sometimes needs more time," or, "I'm navigating some medication effects that impact my physical responses." State it as fact, not failure. Next, and this is crucial, ask questions instead of making assumptions. Don't assume your partner is disappointed or uninterested. Ask them directly. "How do you feel about exploring intimacy together given where we both are in life?" Or, "What matters most to you when it comes to physical closeness?" You might be shocked to discover that your partner's priorities have shifted too, that they value emotional connection, unhurried affection, and feeling desired far more than any specific physical performance. Finally, collaborate on solutions. Make it an exploration you're doing together rather than a problem you're apologizing for. Say things like, "What if we tried being intimate in the morning when we both have more energy?" Or, Could we experiment with different ways of being close that don't have the same pressures? This transforms intimacy from a test you might fail into an adventure you're on together. The power of this approach is that it removes the silent shame that kills intimacy faster than any physical change ever could. When you bring things into the light with compassion and curiosity, you create safety. And safety is where real connection happens. Step 3. Reclaiming your desirability. Not despite age, but because of it. Here's where we need to completely rewire some deeply ingrained beliefs. Catherine told me that her biggest breakthrough wasn't physical. It was finally understanding that her worthiness of love and desire wasn't tied to smooth skin or a certain body shape. But how do you actually rebuild confidence when everything around you says you're supposed to be invisible? Start by actively rejecting the narrative that aging bodies are undesirable. Seek out media, communities, and conversations that celebrate sensuality at every age. There are entire movements now, books, documentaries, social media accounts, created by and for older adults who refuse to be erased from the conversation about romance and sexuality. Surround yourself with these voices until you start internalizing a different story. Next, reconnect with your own body through solo appreciation, not criticism. This might sound unusual, but spend time noticing what your body can still feel, not what it looks like. Pay attention to textures, temperatures, touches that feel good. Many therapists recommend mindfulness practices specifically focused on physical sensation, not as a prelude to partnered intimacy, but as a way to rebuild your own relationship with your body's capacity for pleasure. Also, invest in yourself in ways that make you feel alive and attractive on your own terms. This isn't about trying to look younger. It's about honoring yourself now. Maybe it's wearing fabrics that feel sensual against your skin. Maybe it's taking dance classes that remind you your body can move with grace and joy. Maybe it's simply taking time for grooming and self-care, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you deserve to feel good in your own skin. And here's something powerful. Practice receiving compliments without deflection. When Richard told Catherine she looked beautiful, her instinct was to laugh it off or point out her flaws. But she trained herself to simply say, "Thank you," and let herself believe he meant it. 'Cause he did. When you let yourself receive desire and appreciation, you signal to yourself that you're worthy of it. And that changes everything about how you show up in intimate moments. Step 4. The sacred shift. Intimacy as spiritual depth, not physical performance. This final step is perhaps the most transformative, because it changes what you're even aiming for. Catherine discovered something profound. Intimacy after 60 has the potential to be more meaningful than anything she experienced in her younger years, precisely because it's no longer about performance, conquest, or ego. In your earlier years, intimacy often carried hidden agendas: proving attractiveness, maintaining relationship security, meeting expectations. But at this stage of life, there's an opportunity for something radically different. Intimacy as pure connection. Two people choosing to be completely vulnerable with each other, scars and all, without pretense or performance anxiety. This requires a mindset shift from doing to being. Instead of focusing on specific acts or outcomes, focus on presence. Can you be fully there with your partner, noticing the warmth of their skin, the sound of their breathing, the miracle of being close to another human being who chooses to be close to you? This kind of mindful intimacy often leads to deeper satisfaction than anything performance-focused ever could. It also means expanding your definition of intimacy beyond a single act. Real closeness can be holding hands while watching the sunset, can be taking a bath together, can be slow dancing in your living room, can be the kind of deep, sustained eye contact that most people are too afraid to maintain. When you release the narrow definition of what intimacy must look like, you discover countless ways to experience connection, pleasure, and desire. Finally, recognize that at this stage, every intimate moment carries a poignancy that younger people simply cannot access. You both know, in a way you didn't at 30, that time is precious, that bodies are temporary, that the opportunity to share tenderness and pleasure with another person is a gift, not a given. This awareness doesn't make intimacy sad, it makes it sacred. Catherine told me that being intimate with Richard felt like coming home to herself in a way she'd never experienced before. Not because the physical sensations were more intense, but because she was finally, fully present without fear or shame. And that presence transformed everything. So what happened to Catherine after she and Richard navigated these steps together? 6 months into their relationship, she sent a message that I'll never forget. She said, "For the first time in my life, I understand what it means to be truly seen and still completely loved." You see, what Catherine discovered wasn't just that intimacy was still possible after 60. It was that it could be profoundly better. With Richard, there was no posturing, no trying to be someone she wasn't. When they were together, she didn't worry about how her body looked in certain lighting or whether she was performing correctly. Instead, there was laughter when things didn't go as planned. There was patience when bodies needed more time or different approaches. There was curiosity instead of judgment. She told me about one particular evening that captured everything. They'd planned a romantic night, but Richard's medication timing was off and his body wasn't cooperating the way he'd hoped. In her younger years, Catherine said, this would have felt like failure. Awkward, embarrassing, relationship-threatening. But instead, they spent 2 hours simply lying together, talking about their lives, their fears, their dreams for whatever time they had left. Richard traced the surgical scar on her abdomen that she'd been so self-conscious about, and told her it was beautiful because it represented her strength and survival. And Catherine held him without expectation or disappointment, communicating through her presence that his worth had nothing to do with physical performance. That night, she said, felt more intimate than countless physically successful encounters from her earlier life, because it was built on something unshakable, complete acceptance and authentic presence. Here's the wisdom that Catherine stumbled into, the truth that many people never discover even across an entire lifetime. Real intimacy isn't about perfect bodies or flawless performance. It's about two people brave enough to show up exactly as they are, vulnerable and imperfect, and choosing connection anyway. The young chase after passion, but those who've lived long enough understand that the deepest fulfillment comes from being genuinely known and choosing to stay. Catherine is now 68, and she describes this chapter of her life as unexpectedly joyful. Not because everything is easy, but because she's finally free from the prison of pretending, performing, and hiding the parts of herself she thought were unacceptable. And that freedom has opened doors to intimacy, emotional, physical, and spiritual, that she never knew existed. Here's what I want you to remember. Your desire for connection, touch, and intimacy isn't something to apologize for or hide. It's one of the most human things about you, and it doesn't come with an expiration date. Society may try to convince you otherwise, but your heart knows the truth. You're not too old for love, passion, or the profound closeness that makes life worth living. The years after 60 can be the most liberating of your entire life, if you're willing to let go of old scripts and embrace what's real. This is your invitation to stop waiting for permission and start honoring what you truly want and deserve. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more seniors find this message when they need it most. And share this with someone who might be struggling silently with these same questions. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone changes everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one thing you wish people understood about love and intimacy after 60? Your voice matters, and your experience could be the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. And if you're ready to keep exploring what's possible in this chapter of life, watch the next video where we tackle another topic nobody talks about. How to handle adult children who treat you like you're fragile, and reclaim your independence without damaging the relationship. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you're not aging out of love, you're growing into the truest version of it.